We are on here once again. Actually, there was some problem with Facebook. So, hello, everyone. This is Umar Qureshi from at Talk Live, and with my wonderful colleague Tammy with us. We were facing huge technology problems. We went off on here, then again we went off here, and now we are finally on here. So, Tammy, hi, how are you?
Good. Yes, good now.
I got it. So, before we move on, let me tell all our audience who were waiting for us, hopefully, but whoever was waiting for us and now with us, let me tell you that this show is a collaborative project of Pakistan ASCD and ELASCD. And we bring wonderful people with us, and we are super excited today that we have another wonderful educationist and a wonderful instruction coach with us. Tammy, tell us, who is she?
Okay, I will try this again. It's a lot of words, but very important. So we've got Meghan Everett with us today. She is a very good friend of mine. We work closely together. She's the executive director for the Emerging Leader Alumni Affiliate. She's currently an elementary mathematics teacher specialist in Salt Lake City. She was the Alabama Elementary Teacher of the Year in 2013. As well as Hope Street Group National Teacher Fellow from 2015 to 17. She has also co-designed Powered by Teach to Lead Utah. She was a blogger for Scholastic's top teaching site for 6 years. And she previously taught at George Hall Elementary, which is a national turnaround model school. Currently, she is a UCTM and Utah ASCD board member, a Digital Promise micro-credential ambassador, and serves on the CCSSO Teacher Recruitment and Retention Educator Steering Committee. That's a long title. Meghan also is currently pursuing her doctorate in education in curriculum and instruction, teaching and teacher education from the University of Florida. So she's not really doing anything lately. And she also has a book coming out with ASCD in February of next year. And we will talk a little bit about that later as we talk about PLCs, professional learning communities. So welcome, Meghan. Thank you for joining us a little bit late today, but nevertheless, So one of the first questions that I always ask our guests is, since we are an ASCD affiliate venture together to do a Talk Live, we ask people, how did you start your journey in ASCD?
Well, when I was at George Hall, my principal was a member, and she kept putting the Education Leadership magazine in my box. And flipping through, I saw this call for emerging leaders, and I thought I could be emerging. You don't know. And I nominated myself, and I was really lucky to join a fantastic group. And as you both know, the emerging leaders are just this wonderfully diverse, supportive group that connects you to opportunities within the organization. So that's kind of how I got started with a few different things. And then I think just capitalizing on some of those opportunities led me to other things and other connections, as that often happens, and has kind of led where we are today. So this kind of informalized network that was going on after the initial 2 years in ASCD, we've taken on with the affiliate venture and formalizing how we continue to grow and connect to one another after our first 2 years. And so that keeps me really actively involved with all the new emerging leaders and kind of the young, energetic crowd that's a part of ASCD.
Awesome. Thank you. And it was exciting that we were the same cohort. So yay, 2014. Yay. No offense, Umar. No offense. Your year was great too.
It's fine, probably.
So today we're talking about professional learning communities, because that's a big piece of your current work. So can you tell us a bit, though, before we talk about your current position, how you approached some PLC work as a classroom teacher? Because teachers are, bogged down with a lot of things, and there's a lot of things to do, but this is a really important piece of the puzzle. So can you just tell us a little bit about how you approached PLCs as a teacher?
So when I started teaching, I was in a school that really valued carving out time for teachers to learn together. And we're really, really focused on student outcomes through teacher practice. So we would look at, if there's something going on in my classroom or I need to get my kids to this point, what do I as a teacher have control over? And what I can control is my own practice and how I present to students and work with students, how I facilitate my classroom. And so the school really carved out a lot of time to do that, both with our own team and then in vertical teams. And it really gave me an idea of how impactful it can be if you're willing to open up. And I guess I didn't realize at the time, but I've realized since, it was a unique position where teachers were really open about talking about what they were doing, and they felt safe and comfortable in doing that. And everybody was striving to be better together all the time. I didn't realize that there was so much fear about opening up in that way out there and in other places. And so that was kind of my first introduction to PLCs. They were just this great time to connect with other teachers. As a new teacher, understand what veteran teachers were doing that was working well, and to really examine what I was doing and how I could be a better teacher.
That's awesome. So did you find then that kind of initial work, like everybody was on board right away, or did it take, like, what was your kind of time frame? Like, I know it's hard to gauge too, because like people start at different places, but
Sure.
Was everybody like, let's just, we're doing this?
So I was in a really unique position. I joined a school that was in turnaround, and as part of that turnaround model, the administrators were allowed to kind of hand select their whole staff, and they brought along people who were committed to a lot of extra time in the summer and kind of this overall vision of where we wanted to go with the school, which is different from a lot of schools where you have the staff that you have, and it's come on at different times and been molded through different views. So in that case, it was a really unique situation where everybody really was on board and bought in. Since then, I've worked in different schools in many different points, both as a teacher and as a coach. And there is a lot of work that has to be done to get people to feel comfortable in their practice. And one of the great things about coaching in my district is that we're non-evaluative. And so when I'm a part of the PLC or I'm able to talk to people about their practice, it's not coming from an administrative lens at all. It's coming from a, what can we do to get better? I'm purely here to help. And it takes a while for people to get comfortable with that, especially if they felt burnt in the past.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, awesome.
Oh, so Meghan, you were featured in the article, "The ABCs of PLCs: a premier to creating effective professional learning communities." You clearly were chosen to the featured for a reason. Tell us about that and some of the ideas in the article.
Sure. Well, I connected with the author, Jennifer Fink, through Scholastic. And she had known that my schools had been involved in PLCs before, and they were really looking in this issue to talk to people about what are some structures that you can put in place, no matter if you're an administrator or a teacher and you're kind of looking for this way to work together. Because I think there's a general understanding that PLCs are this set aside time, but getting them started can be really hard. And so in this article, they talk really specifically about the three kind of PLC tasks that you might want to take on. You're either going to want to be examining student work and teacher practice there. You might be working with common formative assessments, or you might be reviewing and responding to data. And those are kind of three broad umbrellas that you find happening in a lot of PLCs. And then it also just talks about, simple things like who's creating the agenda and who's in charge of carving out that time and who's going to be the leader. But really just kind of laying the groundwork for how you can get this kind of collaboration started.
Cool.
That's great.
Very cool.
Right. So, Megan, as mentioned in your introduction, you used to blog for Scholastic. You wrote a piece about PLCs and how to use them. So, can you give our viewers a summary or most of that piece?
Sure. So in that piece, I was kind of laying out the what is a PLC. Um, we all have those different acronyms, so maybe not everybody's aware. But here I was really talking about them as learning communities. So a little bit less of the formalized data dives and things that you might find at schools, though that is definitely one strong option for PLCs. But also talking about how if you don't have a network or a community, how important that is to your practice and how you can go out and find those. So in this article, I talk a little bit about what does that look like if you want to join a professional Twitter chat? What does that look like if you want to be involved in something like emerging leaders or just have this network of educators around you? And how valuable it can be to have those experiences inside your school. So you're really looking at the practices going on there and with your kids, but how important it is to have those outside of your school as well. So you have other eyes and kind of connections to the broader world, and you can kind of, see the forest through the trees.
Yeah. We will post those links on the Facebook page so that people can access them as well. So thank you for sending them prior. So slight shift in questions, but just kind of moving ahead to your current role and working as a coach with teacher teams. So what are some of the things that you've seen recently that are some really strong points that teams are able to do together and move forward with their practice?
So teams that are strong first have that kind of trust factor. And whether they really have it or whether it's just kind of, okay, we're going to commit to this even though we're not sure, they're real comfortable talking about what's going on in their classrooms. When people are really protective of what they're doing and they either feel on one end like they don't want to show off or on the other end like they're being told they're doing something wrong, they don't open up. And then we can't really talk about what's going on with students and how we can change or fix that. So the teams that I work with that are really practice-based, they're looking at the teacher moves in the classroom, how it's affecting students. They're focused always on student work or student outcomes or student actions that they want to elicit. As opposed to, because I'm sure you're thinking like, well, what else would they be doing? As opposed to getting bogged down in, complaints or item by item, I don't like this question, or blaming external factors that they really don't have control over. So those PLCs are really focused, and they're also just really consistent. My teachers have a lot of leeway in how they run their PLCs, and the ones that are the most productive always meet every week, and they have schedules and they have something that they want to look at or do every time. And so that consistency is really vital to them being able to like move forward with what they're working on.
That's just as you were talking there, I had an additional question about the sustainability of PLC work. So you had mentioned, people who have kind of some flexibility in what they can focus on tend to be the ones who can be more consistently meeting and looking at things. So is there something else, like if there's, say, a teacher team that has difficulty finding time in their schedule or something, what kind of advice would you offer teachers who can't find a way to be sustainable with, like, when do we meet or what do we look at or that kind of thing?
I think that the further ahead you can set something like that, the better. I can't imagine an administrator in the world that couldn't support this effort, but they're going to need to see that there's outcomes from it. So really kind of keeping track of what you're talking about, whether that's agendas or outcomes or work products or whatever it is, I think would go a long way towards in the future getting somebody to help you carve out that bit of time. I think you have to think out of the box a little bit sometimes. So maybe that means that you have a Voxer chat where it's entirely focused on those kinds of issues. You know, we're not talking about the field trip right now. We're talking about these things. Maybe it's a space where you're already convening and you're just going to carve out and dedicate a certain amount of time. I think the use of protocols in PLCs is really, really strong. It helps people to be vulnerable because they don't feel like it's this random attack. They feel like I'm following these steps. And they can really help focus the conversation. But another thing they do is they really help with the time. So you can pull a protocol that's meant to be 15 minutes or 20 minutes. You know, you don't have to have an hour, and come with your student work ready to go, and you can kind of go through there. And it feels like a short amount of time, but you could really kind of accomplish something even with that little bit.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the greatest pieces of advice where the protocol really, like, you can spend like 15-20 minutes. You don't need an hour to convene with your PLC if you use your time effectively. And I think that could really alleviate a lot of stress for teachers, just knowing that. And sorry, Umair, before you move on to your question, another thought popped in mind. So just thinking about the work ahead, because I know you're starting back at work next week with teachers. So are there kind of, and I hate to use this word trends, but is there something happening right now where you kind of anticipate what teachers might be working on that's different from the past year, or what are you anticipating for PLC work?
Sure. So our district has a pilot at 2 schools with Nancy Fry and John Hattie's work on assessment capable visible learners. And we had a year-long working on that with kind of the leadership teams this past year, and it's really being rolled out fully to the teams this year. So one of my schools is really focused on that. And in addition to that, the work that we're doing in our focus schools or our state turnaround schools tends to align really closely with this idea. And it's really about metacognition, getting kids to think about where they are and where they need to be. And a big part of that is teachers knowing, right? Teacher clarity. So a lot of our work is focused on making I can statements, finding learning targets, learning objectives, and then breaking those down into measurable pieces. What's our success criteria? How will we know when we know? And how are we going to convey that to students? And so I anticipate certainly at one school, and I believe both, that'll be a big push for us this year. And then the other thing is that our district is a minority majority district. We are a refugee community. We have 126 languages in our district. And so the push to support our ESL learners is huge. And so we're always working towards what are the structures and supports that we can provide in our teaching that will help our ELs.
Okay. Yeah.
Great.
That's a lot of work. Great. Big work.
So, Meghan, you and your and obviously our good friend Fred Andy are in the final stages of writing your book.
Yeah.
So it is due to come out in February. So give us a teaser about the book, how it has actually been influenced by the coaching and PLC support work you do.
Right. Well, so and it's tied to PLCs. It all comes back to relationships, right? And your coaching relationship and your relationship within your team or the learners you're working with. And our book is all really about relationships. It's called Forces of Influence. And it's about how educators can leverage their relationships to drive change, and how you can really do that from any position that you're in. It's very important to us that this is not a top-down situation, but that anybody has the ability to drive change around them. But there are kind of these 4 ways in which that typically occurs. And so we talk about pushes, pulls, nudges, and shoves, and how you can implement those different forces, when's an appropriate time to put them to use, what relationships they work best with, and what you can do if they don't work, because sometimes we try to influence others and it doesn't work out. So, so what do you do to remediate then? But you can see how that would have a strong tie to really anything that you're doing in a school. But in a PLC, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to drive change for your students and your teachers. And so building off those relationships you have is really important.
I'm excited to get my hands on it.
Me too.
It's very exciting. So we just have a few minutes left. So can you talk a bit about some of the things that you're reading? Because as a doctoral student, you do a lot of reading, plus your own reading. So what are some of the good stuff that you've got on the go right now?
So I should have pulled my books off my shelf.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. So this past summer, we were working with history. And so we're looking at the history of education and read a lot of different things. So really not work from the past so much as modern work looking back and kind of giving an overview of how did schools develop and start? How did we get to where we are in the practices that we use? And so that was some interesting reading. We've read from Linda Darling Hammond, Education in the Flat World, and the book just makes me angry because it strikes a chord. You think, we know the right things to do and we're not following them sometimes, and makes you kind of mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Burn the system to the ground. And this upcoming semester in critical pedagogy, we're really examining a lot of critical race theory. And so we're going to be reading White Fragility, for those who teach in the hood and other teachers too. The other books are escaping me at the moment, but
that's okay.
So we're really kind of focused on those marginalized communities and what we can do better for our students that we know have long been left behind and disenfranchised.
Yeah. The first book that you mentioned about the history of education, school, was there any pieces in there about how teachers go about their learning in the past, that like their professional learning? I don't know if that's even the phrase that would have been called, but like teacher meetings or whatever, how has that
so
changed
like
over
PLCs of yesteryear?
Yeah.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, no, there was not a lot of discussion about that. And I don't know that it was necessarily, happening, right? I mean, I think that there was such a long period of time where schools were just learning how to function. I mean, the modern school system really wasn't kind of settled in what we know as the American school system today until maybe the 1930s. And so there was just a long time of even getting kind of a consistent system and getting people to believe in the value of education. Kind of the discussion in the book is, do we as schools affect society, or does society affect schools? Which one changes first and which one can have an impact? I think, as teachers, we would like to say that we teach and we educate and the kids go forth and they change the world. But really school has long been a reaction to kind of public opinion and what's been going on in other places. And so I think that that's why PLCs were largely overlooked. And I think that's why they get overlooked today too. People are such in the day to day that it's hard for them to kind of stop and examine and get better at their practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Very interesting. So do you have any last questions, Umair?
I'm just listing a lot of things.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot to think about, again, as usual.
One last thing before we go off here. there are countries who are well established and in education, and there are countries which are still striving hard. So suppose you are given the task to give consultation. I mean, you become the consultant of a school, and you have a chart, a to-do list, what to do to start a PLC in a school. So how
What do I
do you
do?
start?
What's on the list?
I think I would look towards practitioner inquiry more than PLCs even. I think PLCs kind of came about as this way of creating urgency and examining the data and realizing where you are and where you need to be. And that's good. That's, there's certainly a time and place for that.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about practitioner inquiry, you are allowing teachers to really examine and explore their own practice. And a big part of that is then how do they monitor and collect data and then share what they're doing back with others. And so I think I would want to talk, yes, I want to create these collaborative spaces and times. I mean, I think that has to be carved out in any situation you're creating. But beyond that, I think I would really want to look at what is it that teachers want to learn? What is it that they're curious about? What do they want to do? I don't want to bring them data and tell them you're not where you need to be. I want them to look at the data and say, something's not working here. Help me fix it. How can I change this? Let me try this. Let me track this. Let me see what happens. And I think that if we did that, we'd be creating these communities where people feel a lot more open and willing to share. And so I think, if I were in charge of the school, I think kind of shifting from this PLC mindset to a practitioner inquiry practice would be the direction I would want to go.
Yeah, and you would hope. I think, like for me, I think PLC, and I automatically think that's embedded within it, that practitioner inquiry, but I know that it's not. But it just depends on people's work within it and experience and all that kind of thing. But asking the questions about things is so powerful because everybody has questions, and that's a really good place to start. So
yeah, and I think that's one of the issues with PLCs is we all do view them differently, and so having this collective idea of what that should look like, and practitioner inquiry definitely has a place and a home there if people are asking those questions to drive that to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much, Meghan, for your insight and your knowledge sharing. Do you have happen to have like a favorite quote that you might want to share with us, or a final tidbit of advice for people working on PLCs or practitioner inquiry?
No.
Well, that's okay.
No, here's the thing. You guys asked if I had a quote, and I was like, I love quotes. And none of my quotes are about PLCs. They're about
doesn't have to be
Dumbledore, and
Dumbledore is fine. Harry Potter anytime. There's always wisdom from Harry Potter.
There's always room for Harry Potter. Yeah. No, so so I can leave you with a Dumbledore. I can tie it to PLC.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, there's there can always be light in the darkest of times if only one remembers to turn on the light. And I think sometimes we get really downtrodden in school, especially towards the end of the year. It seems to happen where we're testing and we feel like we haven't moved or made the gains we wanted to make or whatever it is. And I think that PLC's practitioner inquiry can be that light for people.
Yeah,
if you make room for them to happen.
That quote totally fit.
I can make Harry Potter fit anything.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again very much for your time. And to our viewers, the link to the show, the recording of the show will be on the YouTube channel in a little while. So you can check it out there and subscribe to the show.
I think, I don't know, we need to check whether this is completely posted on Facebook, because Facebook is creating a lot of trouble today. But anyway.
Yeah, and there was no comments, which is weird. Yeah.
So it's okay. I mean, we will be having this show posted on our channel on YouTube, and we will be sharing this the link again on all Facebook and other social media channels or the platforms. So thank you once again, Meghan. It was lovely to listen to you, and it's just full of energy to understand and get the idea. I just kept listening how PLC works according to your framework. I mean, your ideas. So thank you, everyone. Thank you once again, and we will be back next time with another wonderful educationist on Ed Talk Live with UQ and Tammy. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.